First of all, thank you all for joining us here today. I think we got a really big year ahead of you. I'm really excited. We have both folks from the LoneStar on here and from Team SEC. It was announced yesterday. I'm also going to be working with Team SEC. The two divisions marry really well. First of all, I have to pass right through Team SEC to get to Texas when I come visit. And second, there's such a close proximity there between New Orleans and Houston and such a symmetry. I just think it's going to be an incredible journey. What I want to do today is really just take a few moments, introduce you guys to me, let you know what you can expect from me, and then to let you know what I expect from you guys. And we're going to work together. One of the things, there's a few things you'll learn right off the bat about me.
I've got a couple.
Hold on, I'm going to mute everybody real quick.
5 minutes ago at one.
Okay, there's a few things you're going to learn about me relatively quickly. One is I am a big proponent that the absolute best time for you to make a sale is on your first appointment. One of the things you will hear from me very often is that what's different about selling our product and selling anything else is selling our product requires the buyer to have a good understanding of a subject they know nothing about. Most of the business owners we meet with basically are ignorant about advertising and marketing. One of the things I say all the time, one of the greatest things about this country is anybody can have their own business. But one of the worst things about this country is anybody can have their own business. I mean, you go meet with these people, they can be incredible at what they do. They could be the best plumber to ever hold a wrench, but they know nothing about running a business, plumbing. So our job is more than selling advertising. Our job is to help that business. And in order to do that, you yourself need to be the marketing expert in the room. You need to have a better understanding of how businesses grow, businesses succeed than the person you're meeting with. So we'll spend a lot of time educating you guys on understanding business. Because if you understand the businesses you're meeting with, guess what? You're better able to help them. And if you approach every presentation not as an opportunity to make a sale, but as a chance to help that business, it redefines everything. It changes everything, and it changes your relationship with those potential clients, and they become much more willing to sign long-term contracts and long-term partnerships. So that's one of the things we'll focus on. As you guys know, immediately after this meeting, we're going to do a presentation workshop, because there are some things that you can do that take your presentation beyond what it is now and really connect better to that customer and increase your chances of making that sale. And there's also some things you can do in the close, which greatly increase the likelihood that you leave there with a contract. So that's what we're going to look at today. It's going to be a long, we're basically going to go through this introduction meeting, and then we're going to take a little short break just to kind of bathroom run and grab something to drink. And then we're going to do the presentation walkthrough. It's entirely optional. But I do guarantee you, everyone on here, even if you're a longtime veteran, will pick up something that might increase your chances of making a sale on that next appointment. So with that in mind, I'm going to share the presentation. I want to walk through and introduce you to me, help you understand where I'm coming from and what I'm going to focus on as we go forward. Because the better understanding that we have of each other, the better we're going to be able to work together to get you to where you want to be. That's my number one goal. I mean, being great as a division makes me look good, but the only thing that really matters is every person improving their position in life and reaching their maximum capacity in terms of earning potential, community involvement, and everything else. So we're going to start right off the bat. I want to introduce myself. First of all, let me share my screen here real quickly. This is my family. I have two kids. That's my wife there. Many of you on this call have probably met my wife through the phone. She's been one of the recruiters for the central region So you probably talked to her. There's a good chance you may have talked to her on your very first contact with BVM. If you did, let me know. I'll let her know you're still going and you're having success. I have two kids. Jake is 14, will be 15 in March, and he's kind of the athlete of the bunch, very big into sports, watches sports all the time, plays soccer and basketball. Lexi, on the other hand, she's much more of an artist. She's 13. Actually, she turns 13 tomorrow. So as of tomorrow, I will officially have two teenage children. So if you notice my hairline changing or the color of my hair starting to change, you'll know why. And so that's my family. They will often come to me when I come visiting markets. We're actually planning a spring break trip where we all come down and we stop along the way between here and Corpus Christi and have meeting and meet with as many people as possible. Just so you know, I'm also planning a trip down to at least the Houston, Austin area the first couple weeks of February. So just kind of, I will, as soon as I finalize those plans, I will let you guys know. The next thing I want to show you is kind of tell you a little bit about my history and my basic, how I got to this point. I graduated from Western Kentucky University with a physics degree and a broadcasting degree. I am a scientist by nature. A lot of the things that you'll hear me talk about are kind of science related. But I tell you what else, I've also learned while I've been with BVM that success is a science as well. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go forward, that there's a lot of science in terms of what enables us to do the things we need to do, both as a marketer and as an entrepreneur. I spent 22 years in TV news. I've reported on big events nationally. I've managed newsrooms. I've just done basically everything there was to do in the newsroom. In fact, I was a Neeland Fellow, which was named after a news director named Carol Neeland, who was the news director at one of the stations there in Austin for many years. And so my experience in Austin comes from going down there as a fellow in that organization. I got out of TV news in 2007. I worked almost 8 years for a newspaper group. The title was audience relations. It basically meant I was in charge of circulation and the digital websites, building out their websites. We did that to get closer to home because my wife and I knew we were about ready to have kids. My career in the newspaper industry is what motivated me to launch my first magazine. And the reason I'm going to tell this story, I think there's in my journey with BVM, I think there are a lot of lessons that you can pick up regardless of where you are in your career. The first is to understand your motivations. What drives you? Because if you understand why you're doing the things you're doing and you constantly remind you of that, it helps you get through those days when things aren't going as well as you would like. It's a lot easier to pick up the phone and make your calls and get your yeses when you're remembering that you're doing this so your kids can go to the college of their choice. When you remember you're doing this so you can retire early and have that house on the beach. When you remember you're doing this because you've always wanted to take that around the world cruise and be able to afford to do it. That's what keeps you motivated. So I want to share, that those motivations can be noble or they cannot be. Whatever they are, they're your motivations, and keep them in mind. And the reason I say this is because there was nothing noble about my motivation to launch my first magazine. When back in 2014, sorry, we got a new publisher for the group I worked with. And one of the first things he did was pull me aside and say, okay, John, we've got to eliminate 9 positions from your staff. I need you in the next 2 weeks to figure out who those 9 people are going to be. And I need you to put together a plan for how we're going to cover their workload. And so I did that begrudgingly. And then we had on a Friday, we had a Friday where we were going to fire everybody on the list. So we went property to property, walking in the door. They knew why we were there when we got there, telling people, oh, your job no longer is here. Here's your severance package, yada, yada. There were tears, people crying. People have worked at some of these newspapers since they were kids on paper routes. And now they were being let go. And we did that all day long, 9 different people. And we got to the end of the day. It was about 6:30. And we talked with the last one. And I turned around and looked at my boss and said, I am so thankful that's over. That was the most brutal day I've ever had in my life. And he just looked at me and said, oh, it's not quite over yet. It's your last day too. And so that was how I got laid off after I finished the day firing nine of my friends. So I was angry. I was mad. And then I came across, so I was looking for an opportunity. I wanted to launch my own business, but Lynn's much more conservative than I am. So the thought of not knowing when or if an income was going to come in was just outside her comfort zone. So I found BVM, and it looked to be exactly what I was looking for, an opportunity for me to run my own business, but with a structure and a game plan towards an income. So I, my first thought was, this is too good to be true. My mom kept saying it was a scam. And my wife and I just finally decided, hey, let's do this. Why don't you go to training? Back then we had to go to training. Why don't you go to training and just see? And if you get any sense whatsoever that it's a multi-level marketing thing, or they're going to ask you for money or anything like that, if you get any sense whatsoever, pack up your stuff, come home, and all we're out's a trip to Dothan, Alabama, was where the training was at that point. So went to training, absolutely fell in love with the company, came back and started work on my first magazine. And so my journey in BVM, I went to training in December of 2014. And I can tell you, my motivation was to get back at that publisher in that newspaper. And I knew going in, every ad I sold was money out of his pocket. So when I was working towards launching that first magazine, I didn't track how far I was to baseline. I tracked, have I taken enough ad dollars from that newspaper to cover my salary? And I celebrated when I'd taken enough to cover my salary. Have I taken enough to cover, so-and-so salary that I fired? And what drove me those first months in that first year in that magazine was the desire to take enough advertising money out of the market to cover the salaries of every person I fired that day. And like I said, that wasn't noble, but that was what drove me. You have to know your why. You have to know what you're doing this for. Because if you do that, you're able to focus, and you realize picking up that phone and making those calls is not nearly as important to me as making sure my kids get the education they desire, or is not nearly as important to me for me to be able to retire with no financial worries. Those are the things. You've got to decide what that is for yourself and drive forward. Now, it took me a while to launch my first magazine. So if there's people on here who thought they would go to print in 30 days out of training and are still struggling, don't worry about that. Everybody's journey's different. So my journey started fresh out of training. My very first appointment was with a little deli here in town. The guy bought a 36-month quarter-page ad. Very first idea of training. And I can tell you, my presentation was horrible. Everybody's first few presentations are horrible. But the guy bought. It was the worst thing that could have happened, because I was like, man, that sucked. And I just kind of winged it. And the guy bought. And I forgot what they told me in training. I just started winging it and doing it my way. And guess what? I went 3 months without another sale. And my wife and I were, we'd have these conversations. Is this right for you? Is this what you need to be doing? And I absolutely believed in what BVM did. So I made the commitment to go back to training and redo it. So I would encourage you guys, if you're at some stage of your career and you're just not moving as fast as you think, go back and retrain. Go back and retrain. So I went back to training. This time I went to Milwaukee to train at our corporate headquarters. And I did the training, and I came back and I hit baseline in 30 days, because the second time I did exactly what they told me to do, and it worked. So keep that in mind. I launched my magazine in July of 2015. You can see the cover of it there. It was Boyle County Neighbors. It absolutely rocked this community. They loved it. My wife was working for our church at the time, and she kept, people kept coming in saying, man, I saw your husband's new magazine. I love that thing, blah, blah, blah. But she really didn't understand the business side of it. She didn't recognize the potential that magazine had. She just knew it was a cool magazine that people like to read. So in September of that year, I took her with me to SLC. Now, we've got an event next week in Vegas. I know some of you are planning to go there. Some of you aren't. I just want to say, anytime you have a chance to go to one of these events and be engaged in the culture and meet other publishers, do it and take your spouse. Because I can tell you what happened. She got up there, she met the leadership, she met everything. She saw these people making these giant sales and saw these income levels of some of the folks that were there. And she looked at me and she said, why aren't we there yet? And I had to be honest with her that I wasn't pushing myself as hard as I needed to. So we came back from training, and guess what? For the next 3 months, every day when she got home from work, she asked me one question. And I bet you guys can guess what that question was. She asked me, who were your 3 yeses today? Who were your 3 yeses? And I can tell you that was the turning point. At that point, my magazine, it had 3 issues come out, and I was sitting on like about $600 above baseline. And when she started asking me that question every day, and I knew that after she had worked a hard day at the church, the last thing I could tell her was, oh, I didn't get any today. I decided to watch a couple hours of TV rather than make my phone calls. I knew that would not work. I couldn't do that knowing that she'd put in a hard day of work. So I got my yeses. And guess what? 3 months later, I've launched my second magazine. I'm up there in that 10,000 over baseline range. And it all started because I had someone holding me accountable to getting my 3 yeses. One of the things you'll realize, and I'll talk about this all the time, is we are very, very good at disappointing ourselves and letting ourselves down. But we're not very good at disappointing others. We will go to bat and fight to avoid disappointing other people when we'll just disappoint ourselves on a whim. So that's why you need that little bit of accountability. I launched my second magazine, Harrington Lake Living, in February of 2016. I launched it with 100% of my advertisers 3-year agreements. Every single person that I hit my baseline on was a 3-year agreement with that magazine, which meant from February 2016 till February 2019, my baseline was covered, and every sale I made into that magazine drove my income. So that's where you want to get to, and that's why those 36-month agreements make all the difference in the world. So shortly after that, I became the Bluegrass division manager in 2016. At that point, we had 3 magazines, and 2 of them were mine. So we started recruiting, we started training, we started building. Now we are one of the top divisions in BVM. And so we built that from scratch. Now coming into here with Team SEC and with LoneStar, you guys already have phenomenal foundations. I mean, LoneStar's in the top 15. Team SEC is light years away from where they were just 2 years ago. So we've got those foundations, and I am so excited to see what we accomplish together. Then in August of 2019, I just on a whim decided to start a third magazine, launched that one, and then almost immediately turned it over to my pilot manager to take over as the publisher. And then last year or a year and a half ago, I decided I wanted to do a prototype magazine, which was basically, it's the only magazine of its kind within BVM. It was a magazine that went exclusively to horse farms. Instead of neighborhoods, it went exclusively to horse farms. And I realized there was an opportunity there that equine related businesses had no tool for reaching multiple discipline farms. They either had to be thoroughbreds or saddlebreds or standard breds or quarter horses or something like that. So a magazine that allowed those advertisers to reach across disciplines was successful, and our model worked for that. So I'm showing all that, not to pat myself on the back, but to tell you guys, along this journey, I have made every mistake a publisher can make. I've made all of them. And my goal is to make sure you guys don't fall into the same traps and the same pitfalls. So next, from there, I want to talk about my philosophy. And I don't know if anybody's ever talked to you about their philosophy or not, but I think it's very important to understand your leader's philosophy. I am a Stoic, and I am a firm believer of the teachers of Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus. These were Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor 2,200 years ago, who is considered the greatest of all the Roman emperors, and Epictetus was a slave who became the greatest philosopher of his age. And basically, the belief of Stoicism is the recognition that you can't control what happens around you. All you can control is how you react to it. How you react to it. And that marries so well with what we talk about in BVM. Because in BVM, what's our first creed? It's get your head right. Well, get your head right means to stop stressing and stop worrying and stop freaking out about what's going on around you and think about how you react to it. And people who do that are able to achieve great success in even the worst of times. If you go back to COVID, and during COVID, it would have been so easy for all of us to shut down because all we heard was the world was ending and the economy was going to collapse and nobody was working and businesses are going out of business and all that. We couldn't control any of that. We had no control of that. And if we got consumed with that, guess what was going to happen to our business? It was going to collapse. Guess what was going to happen to our personal lives? We were going to enter into a depression and sit on the couch and watch news all day or scroll through Facebook. So the first thing you have to remember is you can't control what's happening around you. Focus on what you can control. And in our business, the truth be told, you may be able to influence whether somebody buys. You may be able to influence whether somebody renews. You may be able to influence whether somebody pays their bills, but you can't control it. And if you can't control it, don't let it bother you when things don't work out like they should. Focus on the things you can control. And there's three things you can control. You can control how many times you reach out trying to set an appointment. You can control your skill level for setting those appointments, and you can control your skill level on your presentation. Those are the three things you can control 100% in your life. And focus on the things you can control and not on the things you can't. Gas prices go through the roof. Guess what? You have no control over that. Don't worry about it. If you can't influence, why waste mental energy on it? And that's what you have to learn. And once you can master that, you will see your career just start to grow and grow and grow. Also, part of being a Stoic is to recognize that people are dominated by negative emotions. Our customers are dominated by negative emotions. We all know this. When you leave an appointment with an offer on the table, and I'm going to call you back on Monday for the follow-up, those never result in sales. Why not? Because the self-doubt and the fear and the insecurity of that customer allow them to talk themselves out of the buy. They talk themselves out of it. We will talk ourselves out of anything if given long enough. Why do people not buy experts when they're so excited about being the expert? It's because they all suffer from imposter syndrome. And every business owner we talk with, whether they'll admit it to you or not, are terrified that they would write something in an article that will show the world that they're not as smart as people think they are, because they feel like their success is going to go away at any point. And once you start to understand that the world around you and the people you deal with are driven by their negative emotions, you can help placate that. You can include stuff in your presentation that will make them feel more comfortable about that. And you know, like if you're talking with a plumber and that plumber knows that in the market your magazine goes to, there's 6 or 7 other plumbers that he thinks is better than him, he won't be an expert because he's terrified that those folks will recognize something in his article that's wrong and he'll give himself away. You have to remind them that, yes, there may be somebody somewhere in this neighborhood that knows more about plumbing than you do. But to the other 10,000 people that read this magazine, you're the expert. Own that. And you can help people get past those negative emotions. And then finally, you master control of yourself and thrive to be virtuous. One of the things you will learn quickly about me is I hate saying never because obviously something could happen, but I almost never allow my emotions to influence my perception of what's going on. You will hear me over and over and over again ask you for the data, because data doesn't lie. What does lie is that inner voice inside our head that tells us every minute of the day that we suck. We all have it. We all have that voice that's just an absolute jackass. He's constantly telling us we suck, you can't do this, so-and-so's better than you, why aren't you having success, you're a loser. We all have that. And I can't tell you how many times I've had someone call me and say, John, I need help with my script. I called all day yesterday and I only got 2 yeses. And the first thing I'll ask them is, how many calls did you make? And they'll say something like, oh, I called all day, probably 70 or 80. And I'll ask them to hang up, look at their phone log, and give me an exact count. And inevitably, they'll call me back a few minutes later and say, kind of sheepishly, I made 16 calls. And I'm like, and it's not that they lied to me. They really felt like they made 80 calls. But the truth of the matter is they made 16 and got 2 yeses, so they're a rock star. So I turn around and point out to them that I want to have them on my next coaching call to teach people how to make calls. Because if you're getting a yes every 8 calls, you need to be teaching this stuff. But they really felt like they sucked because that's what our voice tells us. So really focus on the data. So understand that this is the philosophy I'm going to come with you guys at and go from there. My beliefs, my core belief as a leader is based on this quote by Zig Ziglar. If you dream it, you can achieve it. You can get all you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want. I do coaching stuff online for not just BVMers, but for other businesses. I post articles all the time on LinkedIn, helping business owners get better. I've got a Facebook page for everybody on success, people that out in other divisions that I get nothing from. And everybody's always asking me, why are you giving all this stuff away for free? Why are you doing this? Because I absolutely firmly believe that if I help enough people get what they want in life, I'll get what I want in life. And I can tell you it has served me well, and I expect it to continue to serve me well in years to come. So that's one of my core beliefs. My other core belief, and this comes from the Stoicism, is I believe every single person on this call, no matter what level of success you've had, every single one of you has a desire to be great. I really believe that. And that's how I operate. The problem is many of us can't get there because either we don't know the path to greatness or those negative emotions we talked about get in the way. And on that note, I don't think anybody on here, I don't care if you find yourself for the last week sitting in your underwear on your couch watching Netflix. I don't think that's because you're lazy. I think it's because you simply get overwhelmed by self-doubt, indecision, and worry. And one of the things I will focus on extensively is helping you deal with that. Because if you can learn to control those negative emotions and focus on the things you can control, which is your activity and your skill set, then you will see levels of growth you've only dreamed about in the past. And I can tell you the irony of all of this, the irony of it all is coming from a physics background. My position was always, I don't believe any of that psychology crap about affirmations and manifestations and positive self-talk, because as a physicist, I couldn't understand how what you thought in your mind affected your ability to grow wealth. And I tell you, what I didn't factor in that I now realize is so important. I didn't factor in that everyone lives right at the edge of being paralyzed by fear, self-doubt, and indecision. Every single one of us walks that edge. And as a result of that, most of us are only ever able to be about 10% at most effective, because we spend most of our days. If you were to quantify how much of your day is spent doing action and how much of your day is spent thinking about and worrying about action, you would be amazed at the ratio. Most of us in a given day actually have about an hour of real action. The rest of the time we're thinking about what we need to do or worrying about it or stressing about it. And once you can get your mind under control, once you can shove back those negative emotions, even just a little, your effectiveness goes up. And if you can go from being 10% effective to 15% effective or 20% effective, guess what happens? You now have a competitive advantage among all your competitors and everybody else out there because you're operating more effectively. And that's what I focus on. The only difference between every person on this call and Elon Musk and Warren Buffett and Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg, the only difference is they make better decisions a few times a day. The rest of us, we are constantly bombarded with decisions. Do I eat the cake or do I not eat the cake? Do I go to bed early or do I play PlayStation for a couple more hours? Do I pick up the phone and call, or do I go wash the dishes and get that out of the way? All of those little micro decisions that we make add up to the success we're capable of having. And most of us make the bad decision 95% of the time. We eat the cupcake, we stay up and play PlayStation, and we basically don't make the calls. And those micro decisions, those little micro, what I call heroic moments, where I either choose to do what I want to do or choose to do what I know will lead me to success. If we can choose right just a few more times a day, you will be amazed at what a difference it makes in your success. And like I said, the only difference between those folks who have that enormous success and the rest of us is they make a few more right decisions each day. And it's amazing when you start keeping track of the decisions you make, and you make it a point to just make a better decision 3 times a day than you're currently doing, you will see instant results. You'll see instant results. And that's what we want to focus on. The first thing you need to do then, and this is what I ask of every one of you to do every single day, is to make the decision to be great. Make the decision to be great. Every morning you get up and you make the decision to be great. And then you try to live up to that. You don't make the decision to be the same person you were yesterday. You make the decision to be just a little bit better. And if you do that, we're going to not only have an amazing year as a division, but you personally are going to see levels of success that you never dreamed of, just simply by making that decision to be great. And it's good to know. And this really is a BVM thing as much as a John Preston thing, but I can tell you it's definitely a John Preston thing. Everything I do in relation to you is going to be under the assumption that you've made that decision to be great and you want to be great. I will never have a single conversation with any of you that assumes you want to be mediocre or average. I will never do that because that's not fair to you. Every conversation you have is going to be on the assumption that you want to be great. I'm going to push you to get your 3 yeses, not because of some arbitrary BVM thing, but because I've seen what 3 yeses a day does to people. I know every single person on that list of $1 million publishers in the South region where we've been before. I know every single one of them personally, and I can tell you every single one of them made a decision to be great, and they focus on getting their yeses. And it's not because they just want to, it's because it meant success. Now, do they get them every day? Obviously not. There's days they don't. But they know that that's the recipe for being successful. And I can tell you, that's why every single one of those people that sold $1 million in new sales this year have a goal for $2 million next year, because they know they weren't even close to being as great as they could be. And that's the type of decision it takes. Now I want to talk about what it takes to be rich. Now, I will tell you, in our society, rich is a 4-letter word. People will brag to no end about getting a shirt they really liked for $7 because poverty is considered a virtue. But if you really want to achieve your level of success, you have to first get past this image that being rich is a bad thing. And it's funny that we say that. You probably never thought about it. But how many of you would stand up in front of a crowd and say the words, "I want to be rich"? Of course you wouldn't, because you're afraid people would judge you. But if you look, even it's not about the money. It's not about the money. It's about what you can achieve with the money. I mean, I hear from people all the time that say, well, I don't ever want to make that much money. I care too much about my family. Well, that's just silly. Because can you provide more for your family and give your family more experiences? Can you take them places? Can you allow them to enjoy the world better if you make $10,000 a year or if you make $1 million a year? Which one's going to provide that better life for your family? People say, I care too much about helping the community. Well, look at Bill Gates. Bill Gates, no matter what you think about him personally and his politics, Bill Gates has almost completely eradicated dysentery in third world countries. He's worked with people to install thousands of sewer systems in parts of the world that have basically gone to the bathroom in a hole in the community, in the middle of the community. And think about the impact that's had on millions of people around the world. And he could have done none of it if Microsoft hadn't become a successful company. So just do that. So what does it take? I tell you what, I got put onto a book a while back called The Science of Getting Rich by a guy named Wallace Wattles, written in 2010. Now, I will tell you, it is a hard read because they just used a lot of language back in 2010 that we don't use anymore. But he outlined what it takes to become rich. And he believed there was actually a science to it, that if you did these things, you would automatically have success. And those steps have been echoed in hundreds of books over the years. Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, The Secret. But my favorite is Jen Sincera. This is, you will find me making a lot of book references a lot. And one of the best books on this subject is a book by Jen Sincera called You Are a Badass at Making Money. It is a phenomenal read. It will give you such a different perspective on how much you've been self-sabotaging your career. And it really opened my eyes to some of the things that I recognized, some of the elements of my life where I have self-sacrificed and self-sabotaged to prevent being successful. And it is incredibly powerful to understand that because you can stop doing it. So number one, the step to being rich, have a definite vision. Know what you want. Know where you're going. Visualize what you want. Picture it. Because if you can picture it in your mind, you can make it happen easier in real life. Every morning, one of the things I do first thing is picture myself picking up the phone and making phone calls. I picture myself doing a presentation perfectly. I picture myself walking through the close and negotiating that deal down to make sure if I find something the customer's comfortable with. The second thing you need to do is you need to stop operating your life under a sense of scarcity. But if you look at any of the major cities and any of the small communities that we have, there is such an abundance of businesses and opportunities out there that we could never in our wildest dreams properly get to all of them at the right time and the right way to make them sign. And yet we get hung up on, oh, I've met with everybody in town. Well, let me tell you, I started my first magazine in Danville, Kentucky, population 20,000. And I estimate I've probably done about 1,000 different presentations for that magazine. And I guarantee you I could walk out today and find 200 more businesses that I've never spoken to. And that sense of abundance changes everything. It changes the way you perceive the world. The third thing is maintain sense of gratitude. If you don't recognize every single day how lucky you are to live in this country, to have this opportunity, to be able to control your own future, to have your family as it is, to all of these things, if you don't recognize that every day, you're going to fight with the negative feelings. But once you start to, and once you start maintaining that sense of gratitude, you will see an immediate change. The fourth step is to be charitable with your time and money. Give it away. Give it away. Both your time and your money. I mean, one of the things I've started doing is when I go to a convenience store to buy gas, I leave an extra $10 bill with the clerk. And I say, okay, I tell you what, the next time somebody comes in here and needs to buy $1 worth of gas, you give them $11 worth. Because I know that person needs it. Now, I can tell you, I know that comes back to me. I'm not going to get into the silliness of a manifestation, whether you believe it or not. I've had some things happen which clearly make me question all of that. Just the unexplained things, random people calling me out of the money, out of nowhere and offering me extra money when I've done something. I mean, that's all there. It could just be coincidence. I'm not going there. But I will tell you this. When you live your life like this and stop worrying about your next meal and stop worrying about things and live with a sense of gratitude and live with a sense of abundance, you make better decisions. You simply make better decisions along the way because you don't get hung up in the other things. I can tell you one of the decisions that many of you have probably wrestled with is, do I hire an administrative assistant? Do I hire an administrative assistant? That's such a simple question. But if you're a publisher and you've got a lot of advertisements, I would say absolutely. Because you can pay somebody $15 an hour to do the things that you do, because your time as a publisher is worth about $700 or $800 an hour. When you factor in how much time you spend doing presentations and selling, it's about, it can be as high as $1,200 or $1,300 an hour. you shouldn't be doing things that you could pay somebody $15 to do. But if you operate from a sense of scarcity, all you see is it's going to cost me a few $100s a month. And that paralyzes your growth. And those kind of decisions happen all the time. And living your life like this makes all the difference in the world. And step number 5 is make every day a success. Get up every day and say, today I'm going to be great. And try to be 1% better than you were yesterday. 1% better. And that makes all the difference in the world. Because if you're better today than yesterday, you're going to see that add up. You're going to see that compounding interest add up so much. And you're going to look up a year from now, and you're going to be about 500 times better than you are now. Because of that, it's just like compounding interest that comes into play. So make every day a success. Start every day simply with this thing. I'm going to be great today. I'm going to be better than I was yesterday. And you do that, and you are going to achieve amazing things. Now, on the practical side of it, I want to real quickly go over the communications and how it's best to communicate with me. I will tell you, one of the things I've got to adjust to, and be patient with me because I do have a high volume of people, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to make sure that everybody gets what they need from me. And so one of the things I'm going to be looking at very, very quickly is establishing a stronger group of market managers. We've got a few market managers in the group. I'm going to work with them to help them get better at helping everybody else. But also I'm going to be looking for people who have that desire to help others, who have that thirst for helping other people get what they want. Remember the Zig Ziglar quote: if you help enough people get what they want, you'll have everything you want. And I want people that believe that and give of themselves. So I'm going to be looking for market managers to kind of extend our reach. And so we all have this same philosophy, because that's how we're really going to grow. But in the meantime, here's what I'm looking at. If you have an emergency, now, what's an emergency? An emergency is not, hey, this guy asked me how to that he told me that he gets all of his business by word of mouth. And I didn't know how to answer it. That's an important question, and it's something we need to work on, but it's not an emergency. So just send that to me in a normal text. I'll tell you a second how we're going to handle those. But an emergency is if something heavy has fallen on you and you can't get out from under it, that's an emergency. If, on the other hand, if you're in front of a client and you know that they've asked you something you can't answer, and if you can get that answer, then you'll be able to make the sale. That's an emergency. That's an emergency. And I always have my watch on, and I have my phone with me. And if I get a text that says 911, I stop what I'm doing and call, because that's a moment that affects your future immediately in terms of whether you close that sale or not. So if that's the situation, text me 911 and I'll call you immediately. Those newer ones who are still working with your productivity coach, make sure we've got a 3-way text so that you can put that out there, and it gives you more options to get back with you as fast as possible. So that's the thing. The second thing is always text me. Text me at the 859-319-7998 number. That's 859-319-7998 if you need an immediate response. If you reply back to some of the group messages that come out, I will get that text, but it may be a day or so, because that goes into a computer system that I don't check often. So reply back to the 859-319-7998 if you need a faster response. If it's something that can take a couple days or later in the day, do that. Also, I only check my emails 3 times a day. I check first thing in the morning when I get up while I'm preparing my day. I don't check first thing. I go through my morning routine first, but then I check my emails. I check it at lunch and I check it at night right before I go to bed. So if you ever email me something that needs to be addressed immediately, like I got this email from a client, I've got to get an answer back to them immediately, send the email, but then text me, hey, I just sent you an email you need to look at. So get that back with me. Now, in terms of the general questions, one of the big things that is a core foundational belief of mine is the more you learn, the more you earn. The more you learn, the more you earn. And so I want to make sure that you get the education you need. So if you've got one of those kind of questions, hey, I had this guy yesterday that basically said he gets all of his business by word of mouth. How should I have handled that? That's a really good question that knowing the answer to is going to help you grow your business, but it's also a question a lot of other people could benefit from the answer. So one of the things I'm going to be doing, and I'll send out a message about this probably between now and Vegas. So the rest of this week and next week, I'm going to kind of be all over the place trying to get caught up. But when I come back from Vegas that Monday morning, I'm going to start every morning at 8 o'clock. We're going to do a live Zoom call at this location. And I'm going to answer those kind of questions for everybody to hear. And what I'm going to do is, if you've got a question, come there and ask it personally, or text it to me, and I will send out a text to everybody else saying, hey, coming up on this morning's call, we're going to look at how to handle the objection. I need to talk to my wife. And then that way, if that's one you struggle with, then you'll know to be on that call and get the answer. So we're going to do that 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. We're going to have an open Zoom call from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock. It's going to serve two purposes. It's going to be to answer any questions you've had or bring up any teaching moments that I think are relevant to something that's going on, and then also as a call center. Just get on there and get your day started, collecting with everybody, and let's make our phone calls together, and we can really get going. So that will be every single day at 8 o'clock on this link, and I'll send all that, and I'll send out the schedule, because those are the type of questions that knowing them will make all the difference in the world. On that note, there are a couple of things that really, one is a pet peeve and one is basically something I don't tolerate. And I want to get this out there. The pet peeve of mine is when somebody tells me, hey, I get this objection all the time and I don't know what to do. Let's say it's, well, I want to wait and see what the magazine looks like before I buy. When you're starting up, you get that question a little bit. Or maybe it's, well, I need to talk to my accountant. You get that objection. Here's my philosophy on that. It falls along the lines, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, or shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. You should never get stumped by the same objection twice. The first time, okay, you didn't know how to handle it. You got stumped by it. But after that, you knew it was coming. You knew it was a possibility. You should know how to answer it. So when you get an objection you don't know how to answer, that's when you ask the question. You either reach out to Derek, the productivity coach, you reach out to me, you reach out to Mike, you reach out to somebody, and you find out what you wish you had said, and write it down, post it beside your computer, write it on your wrist, whatever, and practice it. So the next time you get that objection, you know what to do. And what's so amazing about that, and I remember the first time I did this with the objection, hey, I get all my business by word of mouth. I came back and I wrote down what I wished I'd said, and I practiced it. And I can tell you the next presentation I did, I was praying they said that because I was so ready for it. The truth of the matter is there's only about a dozen objections that we ever have to deal with. They may be worded differently, but there's about a dozen. And if you master your response for those dozen objections, you'll double instantly the contracts you sign. So just make sure you do that. And then finally, the other thing that really bothers me is territorialism. Territorialism. I know a lot. If you come from the newspaper world, if you come from a lot of other media, you get into that. And you think, oh my gosh, so-and-so's in my territory. I don't want these people selling in my magazine, all of that stuff. As I told you, I base everything on logic. And I can tell you from a logical perspective, that's just not good business. Because the people we're competing against, the newspapers of the world, the radio stations, the TV, the internet companies, they all have dozens of salespeople in your market hitting the ground. And basically, everybody in your market is your sales force. No company has ever grown to its full potential with a single salesperson. And if you do, if you, unless you have absolutely no competition in your market, when you get upset about another BVMer trying to sell somebody you talked to 2 years ago, you're basically acknowledging that you would rather that person spend their money with someone else rather than BVM. And that's just silly. And so I get that is an area that I have very little tolerance for, and I just want everybody to know that going in. So other than that, there's two more things I want to mention real quickly, and then we're going to take a short break before we start the presentation walkthrough. The first, that is, I would encourage all of you to make sure that you have a strong LinkedIn profile. And the reason this is so important, and it's often something that's very much overlooked, think about what you personally do when you schedule a meeting with a prospect. I guarantee you, most of you always look them up on social media and LinkedIn to see what you can find out about them before you meet. Your clients are doing that as well. And when I hear someone who's having a lot of no-shows, I can almost unanimously know that they've got a poor LinkedIn profile, because those people you schedule an appointment with, they go look you up. And if they don't find a very strong profile that indicates that you might be able to help their business, they don't show up. It's not worth their time. And so that's a very important thing. The other thing is, if you haven't already joined my Facebook group, it's BVM Mindset for Success, because that is it's just there for the sole purpose of pumping each other up and having information there, learning from each other, to build in a positive way and focus on the things we can control and make more sales and grow your business. So make sure you do that. I do want to, I'm going to kind of skip through some other things here. I'll be sending out, following up some stuff. I do just want to remind you to choose to be great. That's a decision. If you need to write that on your above your bed, on your mirror, on your bathroom mirror, in the kitchen, wherever, just make that decision to be great. And that will dictate how we approach this coming year. Okay, and a couple final resources. If you haven't, I would encourage you to go on YouTube and find the Durand on Demand podcast. That's Dave Durand's podcast, and I think they really help guide us to be better entrepreneurs. I do a business a podcast called Small Business in Small Bites. There is and basically every episode's about 5 minutes long, and it's based on a misconception that businesses have about advertising. And basically, they're all things that I've encountered out in the field selling, and it will give you some tools to better handle objections. And then I did a podcast for a while called Wake Up to Success. That's more about getting your head right. Some books I would recommend is Fanatical Prospecting by Jeb Blount, Organize Tomorrow Today by Jason Selk, and You Are a Badass. I mentioned You Are a Badass at Making Money earlier. The other one is You Are a Badass. That first one is about if you struggle picking up the phone and making phone calls. The second one is if you have time management issues. And the third one is if you have a lot of self-doubt and insecurity. So once again, choose greatness. And that's my message.